How's your heart today? Some people do not leave our lives all at once. Sometimes the distance arrives quietly, hidden inside busy weeks, shorter calls, tired evenings, and all the sentences we kept postponing because we thought there would be more time. Tonight is for those softer endings, the ones that happen slowly enough to confuse us. Not every growing apart comes with a fight. Sometimes it comes with love that was real, but no longer close enough to be felt the same way. The first letter is for a father who never learned big emotional language, and a daughter who only understood his way of loving after the silence had already grown. I did not notice we were growing apart because our conversations still looked normal from the outside. You still asked if I got home safe. You still sent me photos of the weather like clouds in your part of town were breaking news. You still called on Sunday afternoons, usually while the television was too loud in the background. If anyone had asked, I would have said we were fine. And maybe that was the problem. Fine can hide a lot of distance if you use it often enough. When I was younger, I used to think you were the quiet parent, and Mom was the one who kept the family warm. She asked the follow-up questions. She remembered birthdays without checking the calendar. She knew who was upset just by the way they shut a cabinet. You loved us differently. You checked tire pressure. You filled the gas tank before long drives. You peeled oranges in one long spiral and left them on the table without saying who they were for. Back then, I thought warmth had to sound a certain way. I thought love was supposed to explain itself. Then I moved out, and our relationship settled into something efficient. You asked about work. I said it was busy. You asked if I had eaten. I lied more often than I should have. You asked if the train was running on time. I said yes, even on days when the answer was no, and I had stood on the platform feeling tired enough to cry over something as small as a delay. You never pushed. I used to think that meant you did not know me very well. Now I wonder if you were simply trying not to crowd me. The distance did not come from one event. It came from years of short calls, and my own assumption that if I wanted something deeper, you should be the one to start it. I think I was waiting for a father from a movie. A father who would say, I worry about you. Or, I miss having you around. Or, you don't have to carry everything alone. Instead, I got weather updates, questions about my rent, reminders to sleep earlier, and occasional messages, with no punctuation that just said, take umbrella. For a long time, I treated those things like practical noise around the real relationship. I did not understand they were the real relationship. One evening I came home exhausted after a bad week. Nothing dramatic had happened, just work stress, little mistakes, too much noise, not enough rest. I was standing in my kitchen staring at half a loaf of bread and some eggs, trying to decide whether dinner was worth the effort, when my phone buzzed. It was you. Rain later. Don't forget the laundry outside if you wash today. I had, in fact, washed clothes that morning and completely forgotten they were on the balcony. I stood there holding my phone, looking at that message longer than it deserved. Not because it was profound, but because it was so specifically you. You did not know I had cried in the office bathroom that afternoon. You did not know I had eaten nothing decent all day. You did not know my apartment had felt especially empty that week. And still, somehow, your message arrived inside my evening like a hand on my shoulder. I do not think I answered. Or maybe I just sent a thumbs up, which is almost worse. A few months later, I came by the house for dinner. Mom was still in the kitchen, and you were in the living room pretending to watch television while actually dozing in your chair. Your reading glasses had slipped down your nose. There was a mended grocery bag folded beside you, because apparently even paper gets a second chance in your hands. I remember looking at you and feeling something uncomfortable and tender at the same time. You looked older in a way I had been too busy to notice properly. At dinner, you asked the usual things. Work, commute, rent. I answered the usual way. Then, while passing me the soup, you said, very casually, you sound tired lately on the phone. That was all. Not a speech. Not a dramatic opening. Just one sentence placed carefully on the table, between the rice and the soup. And I realized then that you had known more than I gave you credit for. Maybe not every detail, but enough. Enough to hear weight in my voice. Enough to keep showing up in the only language that felt natural to you. Advice about the weather. questions about food, messages about practical things carrying emotional things inside them. I wanted to say I'm sorry for mistaking your style for absence. I wanted to say I was always listening for love in the wrong accent. I wanted to tell you that I know now how much care can hide inside ordinary reminders. But I did what I always do when something feels too honest too quickly. I made a joke and changed the subject. That is one of the quiet griefs of growing apart. Sometimes nobody withholds love. They just keep offering it in forms the other person has not learned to read yet. We talk a little better now, not perfectly. Still not like people in books. But sometimes when you text me, road slippery, drive slow, I read what you mean beneath it. Be careful with your life. Stay here a little longer. Let me keep caring for you in the ways I know how. The thing I never said before the distance grew was simple. I did not need you to become softer. I just needed to understand that you already were. Some love does not speak beautifully. It just keeps checking if the door is locked. Growing apart can happen even inside love, especially when two people keep waiting for the other to translate first. The next letter is for a friend who never became a stranger, but slowly stopped being part of everyday life. I knew we were no longer close when something funny happened, and I did not send it to you first. It was such a small moment that I almost missed it. Someone at work had labeled the office, fridge, shelf, community yogurt in serious black marker, and under normal circumstances, I would have taken a photo, sent it to you, and waited for the exact kind of reply only you would write. Something dry, slightly dramatic, and smarter than it needed to be. Instead, I laughed alone, put my lunch away, and got back to work. The silence after that laugh felt larger than it should have. You and I did not stop being friends because of one bad conversation. There was no betrayal, no cold final message, no dramatic misunderstanding that would have at least given the story a shape. We simply became adults at full speed. You moved across the city first, then across the country. I started a new job and became one of those people who says, "This week is insane," as if next week will finally become gentle. Then you got engaged. Then I got promoted. Then your mother got sick for a while, and I wanted to be helpful but did not know how from far away except to send voice notes that sounded too cheerful. Life did what life does. It filled every open space. Still, there was a time when you were the first person for almost everything. Not the big emergencies. The little ones. The terrible haircut. The weird text from an ex. The coworker who kept reheating fish in the office microwave. The Sunday afternoon mood that had no name, but always disappeared if we found coffee and walked long enough. Our closeness was built out of useless details, which is maybe why I trusted it so much. Important people often enter your life through ordinary repetition. I think that is why growing apart can feel so unreal. You are not losing a single moment. You are losing access to the daily version of each other. For a while, I tried not to name it. We still loved each other. That part was obvious. Your birthday messages were thoughtful. Mine were too. We still replied warmly. We still said we missed each other. But everything had to be scheduled now. Even affection, even catching up. Even the simplest conversation arrived already tired. One Saturday morning I was cleaning old files from my phone and found a voice note you sent years ago. You were walking home in the rain, complaining about your shoes, your boss, and the fact that the sandwich shop had forgotten the pickles. Halfway through, you got distracted by a dog wearing a yellow raincoat. I stood in my kitchen listening to your voice from a life where I belonged inside your day without needing permission. That was the part I missed most, not the history, the ease. Later that afternoon, I opened our chat. The last message between us had been kind and recent enough, but careful, adult, light. I typed, "I miss when we didn't have to catch up because we already knew the middle of each other's days." Then I deleted it because it felt too exposed, too true, and somehow unfair. You had not done anything wrong. Neither had I. How do you send someone a confession about a loss they are also quietly living? Instead, I sent. Found an old voice note from you. It made me smile. You answered, "Ah, I miss those days." I stared at those 5 words for a long time. Not because they solved anything, but because they named the truth without making it heavier than it already was. Those days, not the friendship. Not me. Not you. Just the version of closeness that used to arrive so naturally we thought it might last unchanged. I wish I had told you sooner that I was grateful. Not in a grand way. I wish I had said thank you for the pharmacy runs, the train station talks, the cheap dinners where one of us always stole from the other's plate and denied it. The way you could tell from one exhale whether I needed advice or just company. I wish I had said that being deeply known by a friend made me braver in the rest of my life. There is a special kind of sadness in outgrowing the shape of a friendship while still loving the person inside it. It makes you feel almost unqualified to grieve. After all, you can still text them. They would still answer. They might still show up if you truly needed them. And yet the loss is real. The everyday door has closed. I do not think all distance means failure anymore. Sometimes growing apart is just what happens when lives become full in different directions. But I wish I had said one thing while we were still easy with each other. Being part of your ordinary life made my own feel less lonely. We did not break. We just stopped arriving at the same moment. Sometimes the hardest distance is not silence. It is politeness where ease used to live. The last letter is for someone I loved, and for the long quiet stretch before either of us admitted we were already becoming strangers. We were still saying goodnight when the distance had already started. That is the part I go back to sometimes, not the ending. The weeks before it, when everything still looked mostly intact. Your mug still in the dish rack, my shoes beside yours near the door. Groceries bought for two. Shared toothpaste. Routine. On paper, we were still together. In the room, we were already leaning away from each other in small, careful ways. We were never a loud couple. No slammed doors. No impossible betrayals. We built our life on ordinary cooperation. You watered the plant because you remembered. I paid the internet bill because I never forgot. You cut fruit after dinner. I packed leftovers into containers. We knew each other's tiredness by the sound of keys hitting the table. Love, for us, looked like taking turns being the steadier one. Maybe that is why the drift took so long to admit. We were too fashionable. If someone had asked me then whether something was wrong, I would have said we were just tired. And it was true. Work was heavier. Your hours had changed. Mine had too. We were living side by side in the same apartment, carrying full days back into the same evening, then mistaking logistics for connection. We still asked, "Did you eat?" We still said, "Text me when you get there." But the softer conversations started arriving less often. We stopped reaching for each other in the middle of the day with random thoughts. The little bridge messages disappeared first. That should have warned me. I think relationships start to thin out long before they end. Not because love vanishes overnight, but because the small offerings become irregular. The photo from the grocery store. The comment about a song in the taxi. The message that says nothing important except "I thought of you in this moment." Without those, the bigger things start having nowhere gentle to land. One night we were eating dinner in the kitchen, and I realized I had already told a coworker something before telling you. It was not even an intimate thing, just a small frustration, a tiny office story. But the fact that I had spent the thought elsewhere before bringing it home unsettled me. You were right there, close enough to pass me the salt, far enough that my inner life had started taking side roads around you. I wonder now if you felt it too. There was a Saturday when we went grocery shopping and moved through the store like a good team. Efficient, familiar, almost tender in habit. You remembered I liked the green tea with the plain label. I remembered you hated when bananas were too ripe. We carried the bags upstairs together. You put away the cold things. I folded the reusable bags back into the drawer. Everything looked exactly like care. But later that night, sitting on opposite ends of the couch, I understood something quietly devastating. Routine can continue even after emotional intimacy has begun to thin. Two decent people can keep being considerate long after they stop feeling reached. I did not know how to say that without sounding ungrateful for all the goodness that still remained. You were not treating me badly. I was not unhappy in a dramatic way. I was simply lonelier beside you than I used to be. That kind of truth is hard to offer because it sounds smaller than heartbreak, yet it cuts just as precisely. When we finally talked, neither of us was surprised enough. That is how I knew the distance had been real for longer than either of us admitted. We sat at the table where we had eaten hundreds of quiet dinners, and instead of arguing, we spoke with the sadness of people discovering that care is not always the same thing as closeness. You said you had felt me drifting too. I said I had not known how to stop it. We both cried a little, then apologized for crying, which was very on brand for us. What I wish I had said sooner was not, "Please stay." It was something more honest and more useful. I miss us before we become polite with each other. I miss being the person you reached for naturally. I miss the version of love that still had fresh air inside it. Maybe we could not have saved it. I am old enough now to accept that naming adrift does not always reverse it. But I do think there is dignity in speaking while the heart is still warm, instead of waiting until everything has cooled into conclusion. For months after you left, I kept noticing how much of love lives in timing. When to ask, when to pause, when to tell the small story instead of saving it for later, when to admit that nothing is terribly wrong, and that is exactly why the quiet distance is so dangerous. I do not hate what happened between us. I actually carry it with a strange tenderness now. You taught me that love can be real and still not remain. That two people can be good, sincere, and simply no longer close in the way they once were. That endings are not always failures. Sometimes they are just late acknowledgments. The thing I never said before we grew apart was this: I was not afraid of losing the relationship. I was afraid of how long I had been losing the feeling of being emotionally met and saying nothing about it. Some love does not end in one moment. It fades in the space where the small truths stopped being spoken. If tonight brought someone to mind, maybe it is because some distances still live quietly inside us, not to punish us, but to teach us what mattered. Growing apart is painful, but it can also make us more honest about the kind of presence we need, the kind of care we offer, and the kind of silence we should not let stretch too long. If these letters stayed with you, stay with mine, light. Leave your own thoughts below, and be gentle with the words you still have time to say.